Welcome to Thursday, February 25th, CPS Policy Committee meeting. We will start, as we always do, with customary introductions of who you see on your screen. And we will start with Ms. Bolton.
Hi, I'm Eve Bolton, and I'm a member of the school board, and this is my 13th year, and I'm thrilled to be back on policy with these two guys. Thank you.
Lucky number 13.
Yeah, well, there you go.
All right. Mr. Lindy, who are you?
Hi, Mike. I'm Ben Lindy. I'm also a school board member. It's my second year, and it's my first time on the policy committee. It's my second meeting.
Right on. Awesome. Thanks for being here, Mr. Lindy. We love having you on policy. There's some folks the public may not see who are off screen, but I think important to recognize. Jeremy, who are you?
Sorry, off screen and away from keyboard. Yes, Jeremy Gollihue. I am the Chief Information Officer for the district.
Awesome. Thank you so much for what you do, Jeremy. Rob Wilson, tell us about yourself.
Rob Wilson, technical support for our board's meetings.
Technical support is selling it extremely short. Rob Wilson saves us more times than we probably even know. Miss Pat Bruckner, tell us about yourself.
Good morning. I'm Pat Bruckner. I am secretary to the board members.
Awesome. Again, definitely underselling. Miss Bruckner does so much for us. Thank you, Pat. And last but not least, the two folks you see there, they are not both named Daniel Hoying. So we'll start with the non-Daniel. Stephanie Scott, who are you?
Hi, everybody. Stephanie Scott, Assistant General Counsel.
And Dan Hoying, General Counsel.
Awesome. Mike Morosky, I am a school board member and the chair of the policy committee. We're going to move this meeting right along. We have a lot of good stuff on the agenda, and a couple board members have to be somewhere for their job, to do work later. So we're gonna have a great discussion, and we're gonna keep it moving. So our last introduction you see on the screen is a guest. We're kicking off with a presentation. For those of you who attended last time, you'll recall we discussed therapy dogs in schools and the value of that, and potentially looking at, what would policy change look like to enable therapy dogs in school, different than service dogs, which I'm sure our guests will talk about. So Leslie, I'm going to turn it over to you. If you could introduce yourself and who you represent, and make us smarter about therapy dogs.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Leslie Kreinis, and I am with Circle Tail. We are a nonprofit organization. We've been in existence for 24 years now. We are ADI accredited Assistance Dog International, and we're the only one that is in the tri-state area, and we're held to the highest standards that are needed for accreditation. We do train dogs to be service dogs in the area of mobility, hearing, and diabetic alert. All our dogs, our service dogs, are partnered at no cost to the person who's receiving the dog. These dogs do fall under the Disabilities Act and have full access with the individual they are partnered with. So it's one dog, one person partnered under the Disabilities Act, and those are service dogs. As you mentioned, about a year and a half ago, we started identifying dogs that, yes, we're much more social, happier to be with a lot of people and working with multiple people, and we decided to begin placing dogs as facility dogs. So I'll define the difference between what we're calling facility dogs, which is what we're talking about for you, placing in schools, versus therapy dogs, the terminology that we use. We partnered with the Hamilton County Educational Service Center and with the superintendent, Jen Hilker, and their office, and they actually have two of our dogs that are placed with their program. And then they went ahead and endorsed our program and helped us partner with kind of all the superintendents around the tri-state area. So facility dogs are dogs that are placed in a school as a working dog to work with multiple people in the support of emotional needs, as you said, but they can also work in the areas of PT, OT, special needs, work with school counselors, deal with the therapists, teachers, crisis calls, things like that. The dog that's placed in the school then goes home with a host family, and they They are actually placed with the facility, not the host family. The host family is just hosting them while they're there. And then that is really to protect the schools or the areas that the dog is placed with. Then the dog has been trained in the area of basic and advanced skills and has met the standards, good citizen tests, other things that we require for our dogs before that they are placed. These dogs have access only to places that they're invited to or allowed in, that other dogs, are allowed to have access to. They don't have the full public access that service dogs do. Then the third tier is kind of what you were saying. We use the terms therapy dogs, and that's somebody who has a pet, who certifies their dog maybe through an online organization or a different organization that would allow their dog to go visit nursing homes, hospitals, maybe make school visits. But they're a pet living at home with an individual, and then they go to visit, versus a facility dog that's placed in the areas of the therapeutic needs or support at the facility. How we're doing this program is all our dogs are placed in the facility for a 3-month internship. At the time of the internship, Circle Tail still owns the dog. We supply the crates, the food, the meds, everything for the dog during the 3-month internship. At the end of the internship, if it's a good match and the school is happy with the dog and the dog is happy in that environment, then we offer the dog to be available for permanent placement. At the time, we are asking for $3,000 for the placement to help bring money back into Circle Tail so we can continue to place other dogs, but I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. We do all the training for all the staff, so anybody who's handling the dog, we train the staff to work. We help you learn how to handle a dog, what the guidelines are for a facility dog, how to work with the dogs in the school setting. We also help train the host family and help them with the things that they need for hosting the dog. And we actually, just like our service dogs, we follow the dogs for life. So even once the dog is permanently placed, we still offer training, we troubleshoot, we have you continue to do the good citizenship test so that the dogs can continue their skills. And if there's any problem or needs, we're always there. And we want to be there to support you and offer that and make sure that the dog has a successful working life and is continued to be happy. Our dogs actually go into the women's prison and receive their advanced training. And they go into foster homes and different scenarios, so that by the time we place a dog in a school, they're about 1.5 years to 2 years old. Our dogs by that point are valued at about $20,000. But we want them to be as low cost as possible to the schools we're placing them in. So we have applied for grant money and for sponsorships, and we're continuing to do that. We would like to be able to offer dogs to schools that can't afford it at a lower cost, or be able to place the dogs at no cost to the school receiving the dog. But obviously, being a nonprofit and we want to be able to continue this program, we have to continue to bring in funds that will help support, these dogs. We have about 10 dogs placed right now, permanent placement, and then we have 5 dogs out there in internships presently. We actually placed our first dog in a firehouse that's going into permanent placement to help the paramedics and the first responders. So that's pretty much a little really quick scenario of it. And so if you have any questions, I could then get into information or liability insurance or different things that you might want to question or ask.
Great, I appreciate it. That was certainly helpful for me. We are definitely not far enough along the path to talk about liability insurance or anything like that. I think we're just trying to understand the value of having therapy dogs with students. So I know I have just one question for now, but I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lindy or Ms. Bolton if they comments or questions.
Yes, if I could, I really appreciate the clarification, because I really had not heard about the kind of that third classification, and that really does make sense. I think that, to me, that would help us be able over time to make this happen. And it sounds very reasonable, and I believe firmly the value of it, and valuable training that would come along with it. So thanks for that kind of demarcation of the three different terms and three different functions. I shouldn't say functions, but homes, let's say, and responsibilities. So thank you. That's very interesting.
Ben, do you have any comments, questions?
Mike, I don't know that I do. Leslie, it's nice to meet you. I think the question I want to ask, I always have a hard time when people ask me, but I'll just ask it just so you know what I was thinking about, which is what do detractors say? You know, like the people who are against this, like everything you said sounds super reasonable to me. I'm curious what the counter arguments are. But I always hate that question when people ask me about it. So if you don't want to answer, it's fine.
No, that's okay. I think that usually, and our track record now has been, like I said, we started out slowly. We partnered with the superintendent's office through the Hamilton County Educational Services Program because we wanted to start slowly and make sure for that. I would say that the information that you get, first of all, is a clarification, making sure people understand these are not service dogs. These are not dogs that are partnered with one individual. They do not have public access, and that is important for everybody to understand. The main things that come up, and that's why I brought up the liability insurance, and that is because it is covered under your policy, so it's not a problem. And then when we have the partnership, we cover the dog. But that is an issue that people worry about. I think the other thing is allergies. What people do with allergies, and we've worked through with environments that we have the schools send out letters. We have no pet zone, so basically, or no dog zone, sorry, not pet, no facility dogs. So if there is an area where a child is that maybe has allergic reactions, usually most dog reactions aren't severe, but we do help instruct the schools on how and where to allow the dog. We use yoga mats for place, that our dogs are on place. We have a crate at the school for the dog to be crated that we provide to you. We offer all these things so that you can deal with the issues of allergies. The other thing is fear, dog fear. And so we've worked a lot with helping people get over if there are kids that are afraid of dogs. We recommend, like, you can put the picture of the dog in a kid's backpack and they can take the picture home. They can buy supplies for the dog, but again, we never ask a kid to pet a dog who is afraid of a dog. We're not there to help overcome those fears, but hope that over time that will occur, and that it has been what has occurred. We had one child in a special needs program who was extremely afraid of dogs, and within 2 weeks, that dog was the only thing that was able to settle that kid and make that kid be able to come to school and relax. And it just took a period of time of working through things. So I would probably say those are your areas of red flags that people are concerned about. Other than that, we have not heard any feedback that people are worried about why the dog is that. And also making sure, that's why we hope that if you do follow through with this, that you will choose Circle Tail, that's why we spend a lot of time with training our dogs, making sure our dogs are reliable, trained, and also that we train all the staff and all the people that are going to be working with the dogs. And then we have things that we have set up to go ahead and teach the student body and the kids on how to react and how to interact and understand a working dog.
Would you consider having one where I work?
Yes. Actually, we have several superintendents who've taken dogs now and several board people who've asked them to come to meetings. So yes.
Awesome. I certainly have considered getting my dog Biggie named an emotional support animal and bring him to my meetings. I know Ms. Bolton would want to bring her girls with her. But the only question I have, and then we'll let you get on with your day, Leslie. Thank you. And this may not exist, and that's fine if it doesn't. I'm just curious. Is there any data, comparative data, that shows the effectiveness or the input on student learning outcomes and mental health outcomes, discipline outcomes, et cetera, on students in schools that have therapy dogs vis-a-vis schools that do not? Because my assumption is that a therapy dog in a school, there would be less referrals for mental health needs, Student achievement might even be higher. Does that kind of data exist?
Yes, and I'll help you. Just to remind you, we're calling these dogs facility dogs.
Facility
And
dog.
yes, great, because we don't want you to bring your pet to school and put them under Circle T. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
Yes, there is a research organization that I can get to you that has been collecting all the data to show
Yeah.
the effects in general of emotion, of showing the support of therapeutic dogs in facility environments, as well as now we've been asking all the schools where we place the dogs now to help put together some data and help show the effects. The stories, the videos and things that you would see coming out of these schools are just absolutely amazing, even to the point that one of our schools has an resource officer who's utilizing the school to go to the homes to visit to help get kids to school response. So there is a lot of research out there now showing
Right.
the benefits.
Great. Yeah, if you could, I know you have my email. If you could send that to me, and then you and I can be in communication after this, and I can make sure that everyone in the committee gets it too. Ms. Bolton, you have another
one
comment?
last question. Yeah, one last question. Locally, what school districts, and I define that relatively broadly, have been part of your program?
Yes, so we have dogs. As I mentioned, we do have dogs that are in with two dogs that I don't know if you're familiar with the Learning Center through the Hamilton County Service Center and Pathways programs. That is two of the dogs that are under their auspices. And then we started out with one, and now we have 5 dogs that are placed with Lakota, and they are actually interning 2 dogs because they're a large school district and keep requesting. Mason School District has 2 dogs and now are interning another dog. St. X High School has a dog placed.
Oh.
The Northeastern School District has 1 dog that's going into permanent placement and has now requested a 2nd dog for next year to be placed. So,
Wow.
and then we have a couple dogs that, like I said, one is in a firehouse. We have some that are in a courthouse and different places around. But those are the school districts right now. And we have a request now for 3 new school districts: Monroe, Madeira, and Lakota. I'm not sorry, Laughlin, that have requested dogs that are moving forward in training.
Wow.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, that's a quite an extensive list.
Thank you. Well, we worked hard, and surprising when we started this, we especially dealing with COVID, we never knew that a year and a half later we would be this far along. But it's very exciting, and the need is really great. And we've had one school district that had 2 suicides recently in middle school and younger kids, and so our dogs were there. And we also are working on an ambassador program with our dogs in training to be there for availability for crisis calls too. And that's at no cost. That's just something Circletail wants to offer out to the community as well, to offer support. So, I mean, we are there to support the community and help you guys.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. We could probably keep talking all day. Before you go, and to remind the public, this whole idea came up because of a senior at Clark Montessori, Ray Bender, who is doing her senior project on this. So I think that's really cool that these conversations seemingly are going to continue. Seems that there's interest. So I will report out on this at our full board meeting. Just talking to Eve and Ben right now, and see what, the temperature of the board is, and, kind of gauge what might or might not be next. But I think there's definitely an appetite, Leslie, and you really helped make us smarter today. So thank you so much. I hope you have a great Thursday, and we may very well see you again. So stay tuned. And now you have blue jeans. You did a great job.
Right. I know, right?
You did a great job. Yeah. All right.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Take care, guys.
All right, Leslie. Bye. All right, moving right along. That was great. Moving right along to our board policy and equity committee work plan. So every committee has to have their work plan ready to go. And now, Dan, I don't know if you have ours, if you can pop it up on the screen, or if I have the ability to do that, because I do have it.
I can throw it up there, Mike.
Okay. And so the work plan, our work plan, historically, at least the 3 years I've been on this committee, is pretty predefined in that the work of the committee is to go through all of the policies, update them every 7 years. And we do that. Of course, last year, this committee engaged in some new work with the anti-racism policy. Happy to see the position posted for the new diversity, equity, and inclusion officer yesterday. That's exciting. But also, Ms. Bolton at our last board meeting gave us some really, what I thought was interesting homework about, looking at policies that govern the board work versus administration. And then Mr. Lindy also brought up an interesting point about what do we do to make sure these policies are doing what they say they're going to do. So I'm up for, adding to the work plan. I do think that what's in front of us here that Dan has put up should stay there. We continue to go through the review. But I'll just open it up right now, if it's all the same, to Mr. Lindy and Ms. Bolton, what you all think about our work plan that we present to the board for approval. In addition to the standard sort of going through all these. And Dan, if you could just scroll so people can see like the amount of policies we go through, and you can see the reviewed 2018, 2019. We've been going through these since I've been on the board in 2018. It kind of been a lull. You'll see some still have to be reviewed. So yeah, I'll open the floor. Ms. Bolton.
Yeah, I think maintaining the cycle as best we can is helpful, and especially as Ben has mentioned about the accountability and what have you. And we also have an administration that's very committed to actually abiding by the policies and writing the guidelines for them. I would say on the work plan, for sure, we should add the part of our bylaws that talk about the role of the of the Policy and Equity Committee. And that should be part of our work plan. Besides this cycle listing of the 300 and some, we should have, and I think a couple of the other committees do it as well, the section from the bylaws that says what we're supposed to actually be doing as a committee. And it also includes those parts of the strategic plan that are applicable to the policy committee, Policy and Equity Committee. So I would like us to add just at least the section that comes from our actual bylaws to our work plan.
That's fair. And then I'm looking to Mr. Hoying, Ms. Scott, and you too, Ms. Bolton, since you brought it up, for suggestions on what that actually, looks like. So in the past, we've presented the document that's in front of us to the board and said, here's what we're going to do. And it's just sort of been like, okay, go review your policies. But now, I am biased as I do policy for a living, and I think it's very powerful. Ms. Bolton can tell you how powerful it is being a part of the equity policy work. So how do we word this then? And again, I'm looking to counsel's office or Ms. Bolton, Mr. Lindy too. I mean, anybody. How does that get worded then? Do we just lift it right out of the bylaws? Okay.
Can I ask a question about that, Mike?
Yeah.
Or Eve, how is that different from what the ad hoc committee was doing?
Which ad hoc?
The most recent ad hoc that reviewed the bylaws?
Were you, I misheard Eve. I thought you were saying that part of the work plan would be a review of like the bylaws that are like the expectations for the policy committee, but I may have misheard that.
No, I probably didn't explain it properly. I was just saying that we should lift the section. What other committees have done is lift the section of the bylaws that have been passed. And what it does, it prefaces this listing. And I think in the bylaws, it even talks about a cycle of review. But and then also, I believe in the bylaws, at least it is for the other committees, the parts of the strategic plan that are also
I got it.
Yeah, so just lifting it, preceding this or following this. That way our work plan can be more than the cycle review.
Got it. So you're saying that we would include a review of the board bylaws in part of our work plan?
No.
No.
He's saying, sorry.
I'm saying just include the text from the bylaws where it describes the finance committee or the policy committee.
Gotcha.
With that, yeah. No, Ben, you're right. I was not being clear. So don't worry.
No. I think it was me misreading. I'm
Okay.
genuine. I appreciate the clarification, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what Eve is suggesting is, when we updated the bylaws, we got a little more explicit about what each committee would do, so that we just would take that language and include it, like just to remind ourselves, hold us accountable that this is what we say we will do, which seems fair. I mean, those board approved, and it's not anything necessarily radical. And look, there's Mr. Hoying right there. My goodness, I was going to pull it up myself. So we will intentionally design data-informed, customer-focused, student-centered, et cetera. It's what we do. Policy committee will receive and act on reports, receive suggestions, concerns, respond to assignments, et cetera, et cetera. And then here you go, Mr. Lindy. If you look at F, monitor the fair and equitable use of goods and services within the policy committee's responsibilities. Close to / approaching what you were saying, but not quite there. So I want to give you the opportunity, if there is an appetite to include some sort of, review of the effectiveness. I don't want to lose what you brought up the last meeting. I say, if it's all the same with this committee, we include that language that's in front of us. Mr. Hoying, if we can have that like on our work plan. So the list of the policies, the responsibilities of the policy committee. And then again, not to belabor the point, but kick it to you, Mr. Lindy, if there's, I know you had questions about, tracking of the policies.
Yeah. I tried to do my homework between last meeting and this one, which was to look through and try to figure out if there were some that deserved particular attention. And honestly, my head went to the equity policy and the anti-racism policy as the two that feel like there's the biggest opportunity to do some. I want to use the word auditing in air quotes. Like I don't know quite what this looks like yet, but some kind of one thing to have something in writing. It's another thing for that to live and breathe in the day-to-day experience of people who work across CPS. And so I would like us to do some of that this year. I wanted to come back with some idea based on what I'd read, and certainly the equity policy and the anti-racism policy seem important and good places to start. I also want to say I'm very open to other ideas. I'm very open to what this could look like, but just so long as it's some good faith, meaningful part of the work we do this year, I think that'll be good for me.
Holden?
I totally agree, and I'm certainly thinking that the board, as we discuss our next or new CPS, I would imagine that the fundamental to whatever that new CPS is going to look like is going to be 2255 and 2256, the policies for that are equity policy and our racism policy. That is new. That is the next CPS. So I think that's exciting. I would like us to, I noticed what Dan brought up. It doesn't appear in the bylaws, and I'm not sure why. Maybe this was just a growth out of work plans of different committees. It doesn't appear that we've listed those things from the strategic plan that are part of what we should be doing. There's like a whole, and that's why we even called it, I think we even changed the name of the committee to policy and equity, was that the elimination of policies that are such and such. So we might want to see if that's a part of it too. So I'm confused as to why that's not in there, but I would add that, and maybe we have, as a group, have to review that if it hasn't already been done somewhere. And then I do think, to Ben's point, I hope that should be where we should start, and on those two policies. And I do want to continue to talk about these that I've lifted largely because I cannot sit through another board, not meeting, but retreat or work session where we're trying to figure out what we're supposed to be doing. it's fairly clear what we're supposed to be doing if we look at our policies. And so there are those policies that outline our work, and then there are those policies that kind of outline what we think our district is, or what we value, or what legally we must do. So I would like us to continue that, because I think these policies, to Ben's point before talking about the racism and the equity policy, there are things in the work of the board, as well as the philosophy of the board, the way I tried very, very casually to separate, that are things that we could find a way to be held more accountable, not holding the superintendent or the treasurer accountable, but holding ourselves accountable for actually doing our work, or holding the district accountable. So I would hope that we could review some of those, not today, but that list, or add to that list, take that list down, and figure out what our work is to keep us doing the big picture and holding ourselves. And I know this is something that other board members are interested in, particularly Carolyn, holding ourselves responsible for achieving things, holding the district responsible for what we're supposed to believe in. So I think we're all kind of talking about some of the same things, or at least what we're talking about. There could be a confluence of all of that activity that I think would be helpful.
I agree, and I think the conversation cannot come at a better time. Not to beat a dead horse, but as we look at and think about the future of this CPS and public education and what that looks like, it's going to become even more imperative. And so, I think, Dan, the secret sauce might be moving into the next agenda item, and this is part of the work plan. But the next agenda item, there was a document that I had Ms. Bruckner put together. Ms. Bolton had come up. She referenced this philosophy, philosophical policies and, work policies. And I went and did my homework as well and found a few of my own, in addition to what Ms. Bolton found. And what the document is that Dan will show, thank you, Dan, are policies that govern the work of the board, more so than the work of the administration. So there are certain policies that are very obviously administrative work, policies, regarding like smoking on campus, came to my mind, policies on grading. But then there are policies that strictly govern sort of what we do. And then there are policies that govern everything. So to Ben's point, 2255, equity, and 56, anti-racism. And so I think what I'm going to propose is that we have our work plan that we've already seen with the standard review, that we lift the language from the bylaws, slap it on there somewhere, preamble, whatever, but then add this list. And this list may not be right, but it's a good start. And add this list onto the work plan as something that we do this year, because it will be instructive and valuable for the board to know what we are supposed to do. And Ms. Bolton, you might have seen me smile. And I know Ben only sat through a couple of these board retreats, but if I have to sit through one more retreat where we have to talk about what we think we do, I might lose my mind. And I certainly know, and I won't expect anyone in the administration, certainly not Dan or Stephanie or anybody else, to admit this, but I think they're going to go bananas if they have to sit around and listen to us talk for 8 more hours about what we do or what we're supposed to do. So let's shore that up, and we can do that in the policy committee. Great. And I think the board members might even be happy about it. And be like, oh, well, thanks for doing that work for us. So let's add this to our work plan. I like Ms. Bolton said, we're not going to talk about all these today, but I do think it also dovetails into Ben's point about accountability. I think this is a smart way to do that. We talked last time, as a reminder for folks viewing or folks who weren't here, and for us, we talked last time when Ben asked the question about the audit, quote unquote, that Laura Mitchell put a lot of work into creating procedures so that they did have checklists for that admin work. Again, we don't have that. So here's this list. Y'all can look at it if you haven't seen it. I know Eve has seen it. I know I've seen it. And then Dan, if you could scroll up a little bit. So there's work. You can see Eve, I added like good food since it was procurement that we ultimately vote on. I mean, some of these could go any which way, but I think for the next meeting, I will ask that everybody look at this. So now that gone through all the big ones. Everyone look at this and come back and have a discussion about what stays on this list. So Pat, there's an agenda item for next month. We will dive deep into this and take things off that don't belong, add things that maybe aren't there yet, and then figure out where to go from there. So, but you can see, and then I'll shut up. You can see under the philosophy, there's a lot. And it's pretty powerful stuff. If you just look at these headings, school safety, student abuse and neglect, LSDMC, community engagement, those are big things, and they should be. And I think it's a good list. So I'll pause if anyone has any comments. If not, we're going to move this into our work plan and then talk about it next month. Good. Okay. Great. Thanks for Eve and Ben. All those thoughts last time, because I feel good about it. So our work plan right now, we will move forward, Dan, to the full board. Does it make sense? You feel like you have what you need?
I do. Just to sum up, you'd like the language from the bylaws added, then the work plan, and then the board policies, the focus policies, staff or philosophy versus work.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, like an addendum or whatever. Yeah, it'd be great. Awesome.
We'll get that to the board office today.
Great. Thanks, man. Policies. So agenda item number 4 was yours, Ben. I tried to, as chair, pick up on what people are saying and then, continue the conversations, whether they asked for it or not, the agenda. So you have now that you're both on a committee for the first time and me chairing it, that's kind of what I do. I want to make sure your stuff, carries over. So do you feel good about this, Ben? Agenda item 4, policies for possible auditing for compliance. Did we talk about that enough, or do you want to?
I think so, Mike. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the actual agenda item. I feel good about what we discussed. I just want to look at it as it was on here.
Right.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think the honest truth of this is I've never done this before, and I don't have a picture in my head of exactly what it should look like. I think at the end of the year, I think it will have been a win from my perspective if we make a good faith effort to spend a meaningful share of our time checking either what we or the administration feel are some of the most important policies for us to be checking. I offered the 2 on equity and anti-racism as a place to start, though I'm open to other ideas. And I think that the next check for me, I think, will be in 2 months or so. Have we spent some meaningful time on this, and are we learning things that are helpful? So does that feel good to you?
Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm at too. Like, I feel the next meeting going through that list will be part 1, and then we really start talking about it. And I think it's gonna teach us a lot. And I think this committee, without being melodramatic, I do believe we have the ability to maybe teach our colleagues something too, so that our next board retreat isn't talking about what we do. Okay. Now we have our nitty-gritty work. So we had some policies last time that we kicked back that we wanted to look at again. So Mr. Hoying, our first one looks like policy 7100, facilities planning. What do you have to tell us?
Yeah, so these are all the assignments we got at last meeting, and let me bring up 7100. These are all relatively minor changes. 7100, you'll recall, relates to facilities planning. It's sort of a introduction to how we think about facilities, and the committee requested that we add some language to confirm that we think of our schools as sort of campus environments. And so we added a sentence that says the board strives to create school campus environments that foster student academic achievement and maximize community involvement, and then added that again at the end, public and community input. The language is encouraged. I think we've found that community campuses. So those are the changes we proposed in response to the comments from last meeting. I'm glad to answer any questions you have.
I'll open it up for Mr. Lindy, Ms. Bolton. Mr. Lindy.
Thanks, Mike. Dan, I think the changes you made look great, and I certainly have no concerns with them. I wanted to bring up a related idea here, which I think we talked about briefly last time, but was the idea of adding some responsible bidder language to this policy. Was that something that Dan, I can't remember if that was just something we talked about or something we asked you all to do anything on. I had an idea for something I wanted to request on this for our next policy meeting. And I'm inclined to share it. I just wanted to see, you may have also done some thinking about it since then. And if so, I wanted to if not, that's fine. But if so, I wanted to hear what you were thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I recall we certainly had a conversation about sort of prevailing wage and the long history of sort of prevailing wage being applied to school district projects. I don't, if I had an assignment to add some language, I apologize.
Really, my memory was it was kind of an interesting first conversation without a clear next step on it.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
what I bring to this meeting. And so where I was coming from was I'll just share from my perspective, I would love to see us add some responsible bidder language to the policy. My rationale, I think there are a couple points on this. I think that the trades can make a great career path for many kids. My perspective on this is I want kids to have choices about what they do after they graduate high school. And I think trades, not for everybody, but for many kids, could be great. And I think we have an opportunity at CPS to support the kinds of trades work that could become long-term career paths for kids in CPS. And not all trades work is created equal. And I think there's a difference between, like a trade position that has a healthcare plan, like offers retirement, like has an apprenticeship program, and those that don't. And so what I wanted to explore is whether there's some way we could prioritize those kinds of bidders in the work that we do. And so I was trying to do some research on this, and so I was able to find some things the city had done. I was able to find some things that the Archdiocese had done. I'm happy to share. You may have those already, Dan, but I'm happy to share them with you. And there's a lot I don't know. But let me just finish this thread here in 2 minutes or less. Like the picture in my head I'm imagining is one where, we have like an E on this policy. That says something like, where we're not otherwise prevented from doing so by law. We want bidders to disclose things like what share of your employees live in the CPS catchment area, whether or not they contribute to healthcare plans, whether or not they contribute to some kind of retirement plan, whether or not they have some kind of apprenticeship program. And so that's the picture I have in my head. And I think the open questions that I genuinely don't know the answer to fall into at least two categories. First one is, can we do that legally? Because I know there is some state law, maybe it's an executive order. I'm not totally clear actually, but I know the rules around schools and construction are different. And I'd love to know if the picture I have in my head is something we're allowed to do. And then I think my second question is, if we are allowed, what are the pros and cons? I imagine there are a bunch of pros and a bunch of cons. But I think to be able to have a rigorous discussion about that in our policy committee, it doesn't have to be next month. It could be 2 months from now, but at some future date, is a discussion I'd love for us to have.
Ms. Bolton,
So
go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you go ahead, Dan.
So Ben, I'd be happy to continue that discussion with you, or Mr. Lindy, excuse me. I'd be happy to continue that discussion with you. There is, within our purchasing policy and business policies, there is some requirements I'm looking, and I can share with you. I'm kind of on the spot, but within I believe it's the 7,000 series.
There's a purchasing of goods or services that is 6320. Is that the one you're thinking of?
Determination of lowest responsible bidder, the business policy, local business enterprise. That's it. So it's in the 6320 series. It's mostly, I will say, goal-oriented as opposed to sort of quota-oriented. The city, for various reasons, first of all, the city is required to follow prevailing wage rules, which the district is not. But what you just described, I really didn't have any concern with. Including like asking those questions of bidders that are coming in, and much of which I think we are doing. And I would want to have Robin, Brandon, and some of our folks from our facilities department share with us kind of what they do, but none of what you described concerned me very much. You asked what the sort of downside is going, taking this to where like you put in a prevailing wage requirement, that there's limitations on what the school district can do from a state law perspective. Increasing the requirements of responsible, sort of responsible bidder versus the lowest bidder. The question is like, is at what point, like, we also have an obligation, I think, to taxpayers to, spend their money wisely. So those are balanced, I think, and I do think some of that is already included in our policies. Glad to discuss it further.
Yeah. Mr. Morosky, is it okay if I just follow this for one last second, and then I'll yield to Ms. Bolden? Maybe what I could do then, Dan, is I was reading off some notes I made before the meeting. I can send them to you and the rest of the committee if it's helpful. Maybe the request would be at a future policy meeting, either this one or the next one, could we hear from maybe it's Robin or whoever at CPS, like, of the things I'm suggesting, how much are we already doing? Of the things we're not doing, what are the pros and cons? And then go from there?
Yes, from my standpoint, yes.
Okay, that's all I'm looking for. That's great. Thank you. Mike, you're muted for some reason if you're talking. Or I can't hear you. Can people hear Mike?
Can't hear.
Yeah, we can't hear you. You look great. We just can't hear what you're saying. Nope. Yeah, no problem. Nope.
You're not muted on the system, Mike. I'm not sure whether your microphone.
I think he's
mine. I'll be right back.
Okay. We want to wait till Michael comes back.
And how long it takes him.
Yeah, really.
Do you want to just share your comments? It's up to you.
He's back.
There he is.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
yes.
you can.
All right.
Go ahead, Eve.
I would just like to add, I certainly don't have any problem with that, in putting some reference to that in this policy. I don't even have a problem with making it a separate policy. But what I want to make sure is that the general counsel and assistant counsel come back with where it already is. And it can be something in this policy, even like we've done before, citing where it is. I also don't want to give the impression that it has not existed before. Having lived through the facilities master plan and all of that falderall and well as deep important work, this has been addressed, and it might make sense to actually have something that is a policy. But I do know some of those issues have been addressed and are in full policy, as Dan kind of referenced. So I guess that would make sense as long as we're asking questions and whatever. I don't know that administration has to report to us any more than it has to say that it's existed or that this is how we do it. But I think it makes sense to put it there for planning, and I think it can also just as well be referenced as though it had existed before this policy happened. And the only thing I would add to this 700 is, and it's something that the Akron people taught me this week, that wherever we have the word school or school, that we kind of do school/learning center. Because our policy, what is that, 75, I think, 7500, we are committed as a district and a board to have every one of our schools be a learning center. So I think whenever we use the word school, which is what they're doing up in Akron, wherever they use the word school, they kind of slash it. Well, they don't even use school. They just use learning center, which I think is interesting. And that would be in keeping with our other policy that's, I don't know, 10 years old or so about community learning centers.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a little bit of homework, Dan. We're not ready to move this forward. So 7100, we've changed school to school/learning center. And it sounds like, as per Mr. Lindy's request, if you could get with Robin, see what she's doing, and then report out on that. And then maybe come with some sample language for a letter E. Or even to Ms. Bolton's point, another policy. If it already exists in other policies, that'd be good to know. So I guess it's twofold. One, does that language Mr. Lindy is referencing exist somewhere else? And then two, if not, maybe the creation of a letter E for us to have something to discuss next month. Did I summarize?
Well,
Go ahead.
Mike, one thing I would say is, like, I think I need to send some stuff in writing to Dan for him to run that down. I'm going to work to get that by like midweek next week.
Okay, great. Awesome. Okay. Well,
Mike, can we think about adding the learning center terminology?
Oh, yeah, I said that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, you're fine. I suggested, and so I'm glad you said that though. So I suggested school / is that fine? Or do you want to
No,
go?
that's fine. No,
Right,
that's
learning
good.
center.
That would be a good transition. Thank you.
No problem. Great. Our next policy is 7230.01, donations for buildings and grounds. Oh, and before that, I'm so sorry. I should have done this an hour ago, and I did not, and I apologize. We do have hearing of the public at the end of the meeting. And so if I may, committee members, sorry, I'm going to take a 40-second timeout real quick to read the instructions to folks who are watching. If you want to speak, you will need to send a request by clicking on the hand icon on your screen. Mac and iPad users are able to access the raise hand icon located on your device. Once your request has been granted by Mr. Hoying, you'll receive a notice on your screen. Click yes to go interactive. If you don't want, you have to have your video active, please, and state your name, your affiliation, and your topic. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. And after speaking, you'll briefly see a welcome screen again as you transition back to our live stream meeting. Mr. Hoying will be our timekeeper, so when the buzzer goes off at 2 minutes, your 2 minutes are up. Please refrain from discussing any personnel items. So if you want to speak between now and let's say 10:05, raise your hand, and then we'll cut it off, Dan. And awesome. Now back to your regularly scheduled meeting. Donations for buildings and grounds.
Okay, so this is also an assignment we had at the last meeting with respect to donations, is that we ensure that any donation is consistent with the values of the district, including but not limited to the board policy, the equity and excellence in education policy, and the anti-racism policy. So there's some language added there for your consideration. Glad to answer your questions.
I think it's great. So I'll see if, Mr. Bolton or Mr. Lindy. Ms. Bolton?
I think it's great, and I think Member Messer would appreciate this too, since that's one of his issues. I don't know if Dan thinks we need to say expressed values or express whatever it is, beliefs or values. Yeah, I don't know if the word expressed would be helpful, rather it'd be a little less open-ended, because God knows we're expressing it all the time in writing and what have you. That would be my only suggestion. I think it's a great ad.
Awesome. We'll move this to the full board for acceptance then, Dan. Thank you.
Okay.
7410, maintenance.
Okay, our last assignment from last month was to, again, make a couple of changes to 7410, which relates to maintenance of buildings. You'll see that on your screen. One of the comments again was to include a campus concept to the facilities policies, which we've done. Maintenance efforts shall be made to improve the campus environment to foster academic achievement and maximize community involvement. Then there was also a question or a request that we add a provision for the regular schedule of testing water quality within the building. I'll only add to that I think our environmental health and safety group, led by Cynthia Gomia, has done a terrific job making sure that actually is very much a part of her work is to make sure that we're doing regular testing of our water. This obviously became a huge issue for school districts about four years ago with the Flint, Michigan water sort of crisis. And Cynthia Gbonia was just right on the ball. We immediately, within that same time frame, and we had already had water testing done, but we immediately initiated a sort of every school building review. We partnered with the Greater Cincinnati Waterworks. That was done very quickly. And then since then, we've gone back and done just really in-depth testing of the water quality, and specifically to make sure that there's not lead. We're very fortunate to have almost all new buildings within the district, or at least completely renovated and plumbing redone buildings. So we fortunately don't have the problem that a lot of other urban school districts do in terms of our water quality. But just wanted to applaud her efforts. Cynthia has done a terrific job making sure that water quality in our buildings is regularly tested. So we've added that as well. Glad to answer your questions.
Any questions, Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, thank you. As the daughter of a previous superintendent of Cincinnati Waterworks, I appreciate this greatly. But more particularly, too, I couldn't find where I know we had talked about air quality. And I don't know if we worked that into another one that we previously passed in the same bunch. I couldn't really lift it or find it. Maybe I didn't read it carefully enough, reference to air quality.
I'm glad to add that in the same section. I don't think it's in there, but I'm glad to add that. That's also a part of her work. She's got her testing equipment, so occasionally we'll get a concern raised by a staff member or family about a musty smell or something like that, and she like carries out all her equipment and sets it up for air quality testing. So a lot of that is done in-house, which I don't know that there's many school districts out there that have the capacity to be able to do in-house air quality testing. But again, Cynthia does a terrific job on that. So I'm glad to, if that's the will of the committee, glad to add that to section G, that we regularly test air and water quality.
I really would support that. I think our public's very keyed in on that, and you're right. Safety Cindy has done a remarkable job and kept us going for sure.
Yeah, I second that. That addition.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? And this is maybe an assignment I should keep for later, but just when I have to say it when I think of it or I'll forget. Do we have policies about updating technology? I wouldn't put it in this. I'm not saying that. Since that has become an issue, rightfully so, and we spend a fortune doing that, and I just that might be something to look at, that remains current. Most of it's contracted, most of it's on the equipment's on lease, but the wiring and all that kind of stuff, or I don't even know if they call it wiring. I'm just thinking that might be an area perhaps for a new policy if we don't already have it.
So we did, and I'm gonna look for an assist from our council team again. We did a number of technology policies last year because it was so timely, to your point. So I don't recall anything about updating. Could you give me just a little bit more on what you mean by that? I think I know what you mean. I don't think it's something that explicit though.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of systems, recycling, reviewing systems, updating systems themselves to expand our broadband, to expand our capacity, to whatever. I know our folks do an incredible job, not just because of Jeremy and everybody else, but that's a long history for us, dating all the way back to when Jen Wagner was in charge of that kind of stuff. So we've got these long term, but I think it's happened as a result of having great people in charge of that area. But I wonder if it might not make sense to figure that out. But
Okay. I think no, and I see where you're going. And this also, if I may, is kind of reminding me of our last little work session we had on Saturday when I got all excited about getting Jeremy a new bridge. And I think that kind of what you're like, you sort of talking to. Dan, I hate to put you on the spot, man. And you don't need to know, but we didn't come across anything that explicit when we were going through, did we?
I don't think as specific as, let's say, like a schedule. I can look back to the technology policies and see what's in there. I think Ms. Bolton's correct that, if it's not there, we could add it as policy language. I do think, Jeremy and Sarah before her and Jen before her have done a terrific job of making sure that we have regularly scheduled upgrades to our technology system. I won't speak for Jeremy, but I think a lot of that's done through leasing of technology as well. So it's automatic. I mean, you're not, you are automatically on a schedule to get upgraded equipment, but glad to look through that as an assignment for next meeting.
And Mike, could I add that maybe thinking about more where the board would be rather than our wonderful people in charge of that, it might be a commitment to equitable access, broadband, networking, that kind of a philosophical statement, and then part of that is the whatever administration would figure out. But that's one of the things we found a year ago, that we couldn't even do what we needed to do equitably because our children in our city and some private folks had left neighborhoods out or whatever. So, I mean, that might be something, and maybe that ultimately could be something with city council as well, an expression or resolution that there be equitable access. We'll get them in on this.
Okay. I think it's, does that assignment make sense, Dan, for next time? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Closing comments, Ms. Bolton, Mr. Lindy, before we move on.
Here. Thank you, though.
All right. So the next thing was this Community Oversight Board for Policy 2256. And I will look to Ms. Scott, and of course, Mr. Hoying too, but Ms. Scott sort of steered the 2256 process for everybody, which we like to thank her for repeatedly because the policy is fantastic. I have gotten, some notes from the public, whether it's from our friends at the Young Activist Coalition, and our friends Iris Rowley, and our friends at the Ohio ACLU, all of whom are supportive and are appreciative of our policy 2256, to be super clear. But questions about a community oversight board of sorts, to which I have responded, and just so this is all out in the open, that it seems to me that having our person hired, our diversity, equity, and inclusion person hired, would probably be a good step one, and then then having a community oversight board to work with this person, because I know we had talked about this. So I'm curious, I guess I just have a question, is one, has that moved forward in the administrative process? And then two, I would love my colleagues' opinions about what that might look like, what that might mean of having, like an LSDMC, but for anti-racism and equity work. So I know we had talked about it with the policy, so I just kind of wanted to put it on the agenda and see if there was an update from either Ms. Scott, Mr. Hoying, or.
I do. I was just going to say that I noticed under the communication section of the policy, it does speak to there being kind of a committee in conjunction with the LSDMC, and it does use the word accountability as a part of that as well. So not just a matter of kind of making sure it's included, but there is an accountability word in there. So I don't know if there's some way we could use those committees to serve as some form of oversight, as far as some type of audit for, school building, to make sure certain things are in place.
No, I think so. I appreciate that. Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I appreciate that citation because I think that was a conscious effort on our part to make it a subset of the LSDMC, which includes the community at the building site level. I will say, as a community oversight, I am a big D Democrat and a little d Democrat. And our community oversight takes place at the ballot box. If you start putting other people in charge of the authority more than the board, then you are beginning to go down that path. And who appoints it? We appoint it to manage ourselves. So I philosophically have a problem with an oversight outside of that LSDMC subset. But, I'm more than willing to talk about how we can do the accountability piece at the district-wide level. But I think we've listed, to Ben's point about accountability, we've listed, 30 or 35 things that we're going to be watching. And so I'm happy to talk about it, but I'm not predisposed to surrender any authority of the board, which is duly elected, to somebody that is appointed.
And that was, you said something that I also brought up in conversation when I was speaking with our young activist friends and Iris Rowley and Mona from the Homeless Coalition, in that, my biggest question was also who would pick these people, because if it is the Board of Education picking them, that's problematic. And so I think LSDMC in that language, thank you again, Ms. Scott, for that reminder. I think that's where that can reside. I also believe, as far as accountability, I'm so excited about it. I can't stop talking about it. So, and I'm not going to apologize. I might talk about it 6 more times before the meeting's over. That policy is resulting in a brand new position in the district whose job is to make sure we are engaging in anti-racist behavior. And that person will be held accountable by the superintendent to make sure that is happening. That's a big deal. That doesn't always happen. And people often say, well, what's the power of policy? You put in words, who cares? Well, how are you going to hold accountable? We're going to hire a person whose whole job is to do that. So I think having that person in place and then having that granular LSDMC level is good. So but I wanted to put this on the agenda. I wanted to talk about it so people can hear and know that this is a conversation we're going to continue having. We're not just going to say, all right, we passed it, we're done. Ms. Bolton?
Mike, just to add to just to add to that, that's sort of our internal control, where you actually internally have folks being in charge of meeting these demands and these needs. But then you also have the requirement of us telling the superintendent they have to come up with an annual plan. They have a quarterly report that is conducted in public. And so that is also the more transparency piece that we would need for this, especially as it's in its first efforts.
Yep.
So I think that's at least where we are now. That's light years from where we were, and I think we should be proud of it and not cloud it by by any confusion as to who's in charge.
Got it. Mr. Lindy?
I was just rereading the policy, Mike. I was trying to get clear on the is the idea to put to was this idea of community oversight part of the anti-racism policy or a new idea? I think it's part of the policy, right?
It's a little bit of both. It's part of the policy in the piece that Ms. Scott had read out to us just now. But I'll just read this to you. This is a letter.
This is from the Young Activist Coalition?
And the ACLU.
I got the letter and talked with him, and Iris also over the weekend. I was just like I was trying to figure out, like, is that the thing we're talking about, or is it if it's the letter? I on the call that we had, I think it was important to Iris to get some more input from other people before acting on any of the recommendations in the letter. At least that's what she said on the call that I was on.
You're right. You said to me.
Yeah, like I like that idea. I mean, I think a lot of the, there are things they're advocating for that I personally agree with a lot. There are things they advocate for where I'm a little unsure, I'm not decided yet. But across all of those issues, I think it's really important, like, whose voices are advocating for this. And I think Iris's point about, like, getting a little bit of a broader sense of that before moving forward on them felt spot on to me. So I would recommend it. Happy to talk about it, but I want to hold on moving yet until we hear a little bit more.
Me too.
That's good. Mike, when did we get the letter?
I don't know if they sent it to I can forward it to you.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Thanks. Okay. It may have, and I've tried to keep up with all the correspondence.
I think it was sent individually, Eve. You may not have received it, so I think it's good to get your eyes on it. It's one little paragraph at the bottom, but Iris Rowley said the same thing to me, that she needed to gauge the community more. So, for example, what does Joe Mallory and the NAACP even think of that idea? As one example, what does the Urban League think of that idea? I think right now the takeaway for me, what I'm hearing, is that this committee and feels comfortable with where we are and that we're doing good work and that there's no need to, like, speed up any kind of additional process, is what I'm hearing.
No.
Okay.
We send it to you.
Great. Awesome. Our next agenda item is continued review of policies. So Dan, next time, bring forward what you think we need to look at, and we will happily look at it. Today we moved forward two. Did we move forward two and then shelved one? We moved forward two, Dan, for the next board meeting?
Yeah, okay. I have that 7230.01 and 7410 will be moved forward for board approval.
And also our work plan. It's a lot of work, friends. That's some good stuff in an hour and 15 minutes. We talked about Circle Tail. That was great. And I got my homework from Miss Leslie. I will forward it to the members of this committee so you too can look at your Circle Tail information and facility pups. And Ms. Bruckner, if we can have an agenda item, another agenda item for next time, is just kind of a follow-up on Circle Tail. It could be a 2-minute conversation. It could be 20 minutes. Who knows? But a follow-up, I think, would be good. So it's another agenda item for next time. Dan, I'm just curious before I go to other business. Do you have a recommendation? Are we still in 7,000 or are we going to move?
There's a handful that we may bring back from 7,000, but really I talked to McDole this week about starting on the HR policies.
Great.
As those I think are probably the most ripe for review.
Great. Awesome. And so we will welcome Mr. McDole then. I'm sure he'll be here to help us with those. That'd be great. So we have HR policies, Ms. Bruckner. We have a handful of 7,000. We have the list that Eve got us started on regarding governing board work, and then we have whatever else Circle Tail, and then whatever else will come up. So great. I would like to see if there are any agenda items Ms. Bolton or Mr. Lindy would like added right now, and then other business. I believe Mr. Lindy might have some. Yeah, Ben.
Mine is other business. Was there?
No, go for it. Your other business may become an agenda item. Who knows? Go for it.
Cool. So I wanted to follow up on some conversations that I'd had around the timing of the superintendent's evaluation. And where this is going is I'd like to, I think the conversation we had about this last, the next steps were pretty clear that The idea should get researched and worked on by two different committees, the policy committee and the student achievement committee. And then once that's done, depending on what the outcome of those discussions are, come back to the full board for some more discussion. So I wanted to kick that off. And so my idea, I want to share my idea, and then I think where it'll lead is a request or an assignment for an upcoming policy meeting. I would love to do this at the next policy meeting if at all possible. So my idea is that we move the date of the superintendent's evaluation from when we currently do it, March 1st. This would clearly be for next year because March 1st is Monday. But for the next time we evaluate the superintendent, move the date from March 1st to sometime after we have student learning information for the school year. I'm imagining sometime around like late June, but it's honestly, I'm not tied to that particular date. And so, I have reasons I've shared in the past for why I think that's a good idea. I'm happy to do that again. But in terms of how to move this forward, Dan, where I wanted to ask for your help was on a couple things. So here's the picture in my head, which has four parts to it. I'm imagining a new world where the superintendent recommends to the board a set of measurable goals in August for the school year that's about to start. The board approves those goals in September. We have a mid-year review on how those goals are going in February. And then we have the end of year performance evaluation before July 1st. I think the first request that I would have to, not for today, but to talk about at the next meeting is there any legal reason why we couldn't do that? I know you and I have talked, there's been some discussion with the full board about like what's required by state statute. As I understand it, the legal requirement is that if any superintendent is not going to be rehired for the following year, the board has to let that superintendent know before March 1st. My understanding is that what I described is fully consistent with that, but I would love your like a legal perspective on that for next time. I think the second part of what I wanted to ask was, and I don't know, Dan, if you're the right person to ask for this. There may be some better person in CPS, and please point me in that direction. But I'd love for somebody to figure out what the 5 highest performing school districts in the state of Ohio do when it comes to the superintendent's evaluation timeline. And I don't know exactly how to define that. Like it could be the 5 with the highest performance index score. It could be the 5 who have the best gap closing numbers. It could be lots of different things. But to find 5 districts in Ohio that we think are really doing right by kids, and just see like what timeline do they use? Because I'd love for that information to be a part of the conversation we're having. Through my conversations with OSBA, it seems like we are in the minority of districts for doing it on the timeline that we're doing it. But just because a majority of people do it one way doesn't mean it's right, and I'd love to figure out like whoever's doing best by kids, what timeline do they use? And could we learn some lessons there? So that's my proposal. And that's my request.
Ms. Bolton?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with anything except the very last thing. This assignment should be done out of student achievement. The legal counsel should not be the one that is in charge of determining that. It's the instructional leaders that need to be doing that. And since Mr. Lindy is on student achievement, I think that works coming out of that committee. I think that would be great. So same assignment, no problem, but at a different committee that actually has responsibility for the superintendent's evaluation.
Can I ask you this question? Could I get moving before we meet next with the student achievement committee? Like if I send that by email to Pam and the superintendent, could they get working on it before we meet again?
Well, the next one, the student achievement meeting is what, next week?
That's a good question.
It's like the first week of.
I guess it's a week from tomorrow. Yeah, that's not that long.
Okay. But contact Pam to make sure she puts the superintendent evaluation on the agenda so we can be talking about that. I think that's great.
The only concern I have is that it get delayed too long, but a week is not too long.
Well, we have plenty of time since it's not going to be happening for this one anyway. But my point is, I think the outline that you listed makes some sense. Certainly, the August okay would be meeting the policy agreement or the policy that we have, which is that she does it prior to the academic year. So the August or a little bit before August, that deadline's already or that part of the timeline's already in place. Certainly, we cannot call the thing we do for March doesn't have to be an evaluation. That's a verbiage. We can call that employment status check off, because that's really what it is. It's not evaluating whether she's doing good. It's us having some sort of objective measure to determine whether or not we want to keep her or him. And there have been years that we have not wanted to. So we need to be able to objectively say why. And then that July 1st, I think we need to talk to the instructional people about the July 1st piece, only for, again, they would have to help us determine what we're measuring, because even July 1st is kind of early for a lot of the ways that you would measure success on the instruction. But I'm not having any problem with the big picture of any of this. I think one of it's verbiage, one of it's dead on our existing timeline, and then this other is trying to figure out how to evaluate. And I'm happy to if somebody can figure out, was it the 5 districts that have the best evaluation or the best?
It's a good question. There's so many ways to do it. What I'm trying to figure out is who's really good at this and what can we learn. And I think that's I'm happy to do that next Friday.
And I wouldn't be too surprised if you found out that among the 5 best are probably Cincinnati, Ohio. It's just that we have a really stupid timeline that I'm glad you're trying to get corrected. I think that makes sense. So I just think that if you call Pam and get that as part, and then the assignment can come from there, and we can look at our other stuff, that is in policy, and some of it's verbiage, but to figure out how to measure what objective data we've got coming back and when we've got it is really the big question. I think there's interest there.
Do you feel good about that, Mr. Lindy, then? Next week's student achievement, it sounds like.
It would just be for Dan. Like I think on the part that I was asking for from a policy or legal perspective, I have a feeling Dan's going to say we could do that right now. But I also want to check.
Mr. Hoying, do you have any response right now, or do you want to wait?
I'm glad to talk about it now. Glad to talk about it next month. I think.
Yeah. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I don't want to put you on the spot. But if you have, I also want artificially drag it out if it is a short.
No, I think it was well described. The reason that the evaluation timeline, I think, was set where it was with a March 1 deadline is related to the statutory rule about when you have to give notice. So that was well described.
And that clearly is employment status. It Correct. Is, and having a way to objectively defend in court or somewhere if we decide not to get somebody rehired. You have to have some kind of balance to that. So, but yeah, I think actually there's much more agreement here than there is any disagreement.
Yeah. Great. All right. So do we feel good about this?
So good. Thank you.
Okay. Any other business that was not on the agenda that we need to discuss before going into hearing of the public? Great. All right, Mr. Hoying, do we have anybody who would like to speak?
Yes, just one speaker, Ms. Kendra Phelps from CFT.
Welcome, Kendra.
Members for the opportunity to speak. Again, Kendra Phelps, CPS parent and teacher leader with Cincinnati Federation of Teachers. I just wanted to comment on the request about the Community Oversight Committee. To say that I totally respect your conversation about talking through the authority that a committee like that would have. However, I do understand the reasoning from the students and the community members that the request came from. because in many times it seems from our perspective that the decisions that are made by the board are done based on information coming solely from CPS administration. And this hiring this new CPS administrator will not change that. If you don't have opportunities for your board presentations to include more stakeholders. Right now, you hear from diverse stakeholders by a 2-minute, quick hearing of the public, or we send you letters that we don't get a response to. So I would really like to ask you to start to consider how your presentation that you base your work and your decisions on could be more inclusive so that you can make decisions that are representative of everyone. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Miss Phelps, and that is good food for thought, and something that is cracking that code in a legitimate way, I think, is going to be important. And it could be the LSCMC level, but it could be in a different way. We need to figure that out, though. I appreciate it, Kendra. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Great. Without any further business, it's your last chance. The last chance, Miss Bull. I knew it.
I can't resist. Real quickly, the technology, broadband network, maybe a new policy. I didn't know if that got in the list.
We'll put that on the agenda as well, Miss Bruckner, if you're listening, which I know you are. So great, yeah, we'll put that on there too, Miss Bolton. We're gonna get you that bridge, Jeremy. We're gonna drive the biggest trucks you ever seen over it.
And the little ones too.
And the little ones too. Why not? All right. No further business. 3, 2, 1. Meeting is adjourned. Have a great day.